Our next speaker is Julie Friddell. Julie is manager of the Canadian Cryospheric Information Network here at the University of Waterloo and of the Polar Data Catalog, also here at Waterloo, in the Department of Geography and Environmental Management. And over the past 2 decades, CCIN and the PDC have been working with Canadian and international scientists to manage, archive, and serve online the data and information from their research projects in Canada's coldest places. Dr. Friddell will speak today on building a polar data repository for Canada. Julie.
Okay, great. Thank you, Pascal. And thank you all for coming. It's really always an honor to be able to speak, especially to an audience with obvious interest and expertise in these topics. I know you say you don't have a lot of expertise, but it was a great presentation, a really good lead in to my presentation in particular. Dr. Thompson really laid the groundwork for why we do what we do in the Polar Data Catalog. So I'm very happy to be able to share it with you today, and very glad to be here and to also be involved in planning this event for the university community at Waterloo. So indeed, we are here at the Canadian Cryospheric Information Network and the Polar Data Catalog building a data repository for Canada for polar regions. We are not trying to do data management for everyone. We're trying to focus on a certain sector of research within the scientific community in Canada. So we're trying, we have a one certain forte that we're trying to meet. So I'm going to introduce you today a little bit to what we do. But first of all, I'd like to just respond to a couple of the comments in terms of industrial data, commercial, private data. There has been discussion in the Canadian and international contexts that some of these data will be becoming more public as time goes on. There is interest in a lot of companies to make their data more available than it has been traditionally. So that may be changing, as well as the culture of researchers, publicly funded researchers within Canada. And we actually welcome that within the PDC to accept and archive and share industrially collected, industrially funded data in addition to the public data. So at the Polar Data Catalog and the Canadian Cryospheric Information Network, what we do is exactly what Dr. Thompson was introducing to you today. We realize and try to we realize the importance of and try to meet the needs of accepting, archiving, preserving, and sharing data from polar research in Canada. So the way that we all began was about 20 years ago. Now, I haven't been here that long. I've only been here about 3.5 years as the manager of the CCIN and the PDC. But we began in the mid-1990s, largely through the research efforts and interests of Dr. Ellsworth LeDrew in the Department of Geography here at Waterloo, and through partnership with several government and industrial partners. There was the beginning of the Canadian Cryospheric Information Network, which was really growing out of the needs of a particular set of programs within Canada. And one of them as an example, was the Cryosphere System in Canada program. And the scientists in that program needed some place to put their data to share it with other people. So it was a grassroots effort. Dr. LeDrew and his partners responded by making a data repository that people could get to. I believe that over the years there were hundreds of data sets provided online, publicly, open access for the public, and the other researchers, of course, in the projects to have access to. And along with this data repository, a website grew out of this effort. And over the years, it's had several different forms. We've recently made a brand new website over the last 1 year, We have completely renovated and rejuvenated the site with brand new scientific information about the cryosphere, which is all the snow and ice, all the cold regions of Canada. So glaciers, lake ice, river ice, sea ice, permafrost, frozen ground, as well as cryospheric modeling. And this information is all contained in our public website at CCIN. You might not be able to see this down here, but it's ccin.ca. So if you go there, you can actually find information on Canadian Cryosphere Watch. So what's going on with the snow and ice in Canada? And you can go to the different sections, lake ice, permafrost, as I was just mentioning. And there is lots of general information for the public, so you can learn more about what's going on in the cryosphere. And just really quickly to go back here, this is the front page of the website, and you'll see up on the upper right there's polar news, in case you'd like to know what's a quick snapshot of what's going on around polar regions today. And then we also have kids games and information for younger viewers, as well as a Twitter feed. So we actually tweet every time we have a new metadata or a new data set available in the Polar Data Catalog. So those are just a few of our offerings on the website. So in the cryospheric pages of the website, we have snow and lake ice and some other data visualizations. So instead of just having a data set that's in a big text file and you're looking at numbers, we're actually trying to make it into an attractive and easily interactive format. So we have snow water equivalent data, so that's how much water is actually in the snowpack for the Canadian prairies on the left, and then for the Northern Hemisphere on the right. And you can click, there are drop-down boxes for the month and the year, where you can actually go back through time to the 1970s to see what the record of snow water, or of snowpack basically is in either the prairies or the Northern Hemisphere. You can look to see what the amount was on the ground, or you can look for the anomaly for that particular month, so you can see how different it was from average. And then we also have lake ice data visualizations. So on the left, you can see a collection of a number of lakes throughout Canada and North America, or US, where it actually shows the lake freezing up and then thawing, freezing up and then thawing as you go through about the last 10 years of lake ice data. This is from the Canadian Ice Service, and we get a regular live feed to update this every week. And then this is a historical lake ice record where you can look at the freeze up dates, the break up dates, the thickness of the ice on the lake over at the maximum thickness in the wintertime, and the length of the frozen season. And you can hover over the different points on the map, the different lakes on the map, and see the records of data there. So we're trying to think of interesting and attractive ways that give you the ability to look at the data without having to analyze it, process it, download the data files and do things with them on your own computer. So out of the Canadian Cryospheric Information Network sprang the Polar Data Catalog about 10 years ago. And it began as another partnership between the Canadian Cryospheric Information Network and a new research program in Canada at the time called ArcticNet. So ArcticNet is a group of, at this point, about 500 researchers and students and postdocs who are studying climate change in the north of Canada and how it's affecting the people and the land and the animals and everything that's in the Canadian Arctic. And also the Department of Fisheries and Oceans was involved because they saw the need for a polar data portal within Canada. A lot of other countries were doing it. Canada needed to do it too. So the response was the Polar Data Catalog. So Dr. Thompson mentioned metadata. I'll show you an example of metadata in just a little bit, but basically metadata is the description of the data. Who took the data? Where was it taken? Why was it taken? What are some of the parameters and the variables that are listed in the data set? How do you get to it? Is it in a special format that you'll need special software or considerations to be able to use it or look at it? So that is what metadata is. The Polar Data Catalog began as a metadata repository, And to this date, we have over 1,500 records of metadata. So that's 1,500 data sets from ArcticNet researchers, International Polar Year researchers, Northern Contaminants Program, so mercury and persistent organic pollutants in Canada's north. Environment Canada has a great deal of metadata in there. And some new programs such as the Beaufort Regional Environmental Assessment, so looking at the background environmental situation in the Beaufort Sea area north of the Yukon and Northwest Territories in preparation for oil and gas exploration and development in the region. So it's not just physical sciences data like the weather or what's happening to the permafrost. So it's not just the cryosphere. The Polar Data Catalog is actually wider in that it includes data and information on social sciences, health, policy, and it's completely multidisciplinary. We accept data and metadata from all fields. So we have all these metadata, and now, over the past 2 years, we've started to encourage and accept and try to require the scientists, the researchers, to start putting in their data files. So they've told us what they have with their metadata. Now we're trying to get what they have now that they're finishing their project and they're publishing their papers. And their data files are becoming quality controlled and assured so that they can actually be comfortable sharing them with the rest of the world right now. Because the data that go in are available for easy and immediate download by the public. So these are just a few screenshots of what it looks like. So if you go to, and again it's really down here low, polardata.ca, you'll come to a splash screen, which is the Polar Data Catalog front end. And when you click on the Polar Data Catalog side of things, the PDC search, you can come to, it's a geospatial map-based search, but you can also use keywords or dates, or you can have an advanced search with additional text search options there. And what you find is, once you do your search, is a list of data sets and metadata that conform to your search criteria. And you see here, this is a listing of all of the titles of the data sets that are available. And you can click to see the longer title. So paleoclimate data from the Melville Peninsula. It started in, it's a little blurry, but I think that says 2008. You can click here to see the spatial extent of where this data set came from. Or you can also go here, click on the data link, and you'll be taken to the page where you can download the actual data that are in the catalog. This is the metadata. So here you see the title. You see our CCIN reference number, the responsible parties, the people who collected the data, and their role, whether they were the PI or the originator, which is equal to like a first author, or collaborator. The research program in which they were involved and funded by. So here is the International Polar Year Project on Arctic Culture and Caribou. This is the citation and some papers that came from this particular data set. The link to data, so if you want to ask more information about the data set, you can contact Brenda. And then there's a purpose and an abstract and the location and much other information down the page to give you a background on the data set so you can decide whether you would like to download it and use it yourself. And then here's an example of a data set that's available for download. So there are a lot of PDFs and zip files, and also we have a lot of text files. We try to encourage non-proprietary formats, even though a lot of people collect data in Excel for small data sets like this. We try to stay away even from Excel, even though some people think, oh, everybody has Excel, but it's really not non-proprietary. You have to pay to get Excel in order to be able to open an Excel file. So we ask our contributors to give us a CSV file or a text file instead. That means that 50 years from now, there's a lot higher probability that you can open that file rather than an Excel file when the format, the versions have changed and things like that. So this is a part of our submission and approval process. So when somebody puts in a data or a metadata, we have assigned approvers who are trained by us to look at the metadata and look at the data files and say whether they're appropriate or whether they need to go back to the researcher and ask if they can make some modifications in order to bring it up to a standard that will be useful in 50 or 100 or we're looking way down the road in this preservation context. We would like to have this available, centuries from now. So who knows where we'll be as a society at that point, but we would like to be prepared in case we can still be able to share these data and have this global network of data repositories and data availability over the longest terms. So another piece that we've recently added is a GIS map viewer. So we're trying to convert some of our data sets from this text formats into shapefile so that they can be more interactively available to users. So you can query on the actual data set, this purple line here where a plane was flying and measuring the thickness of the sea ice. And then once you query, you get your results box. And right here, the sea ice was 0 meters, but it goes up to about 19 meters in some places. We also have a collection of about 30,000 RadarSat images of ice, and largely sea ice and lake ice in northern Canada. That's available for anyone's use who may be interested in it. And we also have a PDC Lite search, which is available for people in the north who have slower bandwidth connections. We have found that our full-featured PDC search application is a bit heavy on bandwidth. And so we've actually produced this, which is a much more simplified interface. And it's about 10 to 20 times faster than the regular search. And you can see all the metadata here. You cannot download the data files. You actually get pointed to the regular search if you want to commit to downloading data files. We also have the PDC data and metadata input in order to get all this good stuff into the archive, into the repository. So the researcher signs up and has a login, email, and password there. And then once they get into here, they can these help documents actually are available publicly. You do not have to log in order to access them. So we have a help manual, we have instructions for creating metadata, we have examples of good metadata. This is what we really want from people. And we also have our best practices document, which is a compilation of suggestions and requirements in order to make good metadata and good data files. So good formats, things that are going to last the ages. And we have the long best practices document, which is about 16 or 18 pages. And we also have a short one for people in a hurry. And this is just the front page of the best practices documentation. And I'm not going to go through this in detail, but basically it tells you how to make good metadata and how to get your data files in order so that they are appropriate for the long-term archiving and preservation. And we also have a README file that we are encouraging and hopefully soon requiring researchers to include in their data set submission. So this is like an extended documentation, additional information that gives a person completely unfamiliar with the data set background so that they can know how to use the data set and what it all means. Any problems with the data set, like number 11, other caveats on use, what kind of QC has been done on it, a full listing, directory listing and structure if it's a really complicated data set. So we're asking people to fill this out. It can usually be 2 or 3 pages. It doesn't have to be, really extensive. And someone who knows the data set can fill this out relatively quickly. So this is kind of on the back end once everyone's done their data collection and they're ready to the point of putting the data into the repository. But as Dr. Thompson was suggesting, what we need to do is actually start doing this kind of thing on the front end. Not, what QC have you done, but what QC are you going to do? And what do you envision as your method of collecting and preparing and preserving your data? So the data management planning is something that we're not to yet, but that we're trying to get to with new partners that we work with. So this is just a very simple diagram of our hardware and our infrastructure. We have about 20 servers that are all virtualized Linux servers on top of VMware. And they're set up in 4 different completely independent environments. This is the production environment that you'll see if you come to the PDC. This is the one that's available online. So we have paired web servers, database servers, and then file servers with a 50 terabyte storage capacity. And so all of it's paired for failover and redundancy. But in order to get to this point where we're ready to put things online for you to see, our web developers and database developers and our systems administrator starts here in the development environment. They get everything ready and then they send it to the testing environment. We all hit on it and we invite other people sometimes to test our changes to our Java applications. And then once everything passes the test, it goes into the production environment where it's all online. And then from there, we also have a disaster recovery environment. All this is on campus, but it's in different places, so that if the building where the production environment gets flooded or whatever, we'll have this in a separate building with its full 50 terabyte redundant system so that we don't lose any data. It's all about security. It's all about redundancy. It's all about backing up and making sure that everything that everyone has worked so hard to get into the repository is not lost. We share the metadata and data with other repositories and other institutions around the world. I'm not going to go into details, but we have several different methods for sharing metadata. We've just started setting up web services to share the actual data files. And we have just put information online about how you can get to these sharing services. So if you go to, let's see, I guess I didn't give the link, but it's on the ccin.ca website under About Web Services. So you can, if anyone's interested in seeing what we offer, you can go there. And I'm not going to go into all of these pieces, but one of the things I would like to mention is that we want to strengthen our links with international organizations and initiatives, such as the Cryosphere Watch, which we are the Canadian node of the Global Cryosphere Watch. This is an attempt to put snow and ice data sets that are being collected in real time available online for public usage and consumption, such as the sea ice, the Arctic sea ice information that people that's available in the U.S. Through the NSIDC. We want to have similar types of snow and glacier and other data sets that are available and will be the Canadian component of this global program. SAON is Sustaining Arctic Observing Networks. This is a way for the Arctic community around the world, the Arctic research community, to link together. We also want to finish our application for certification by the World Data System. This is the next generation of World Data Centers, and the Polar Data Catalog seeks to be one of these members of the World Data System. We have, Dr. Thompson mentioned the data site, which is a citation methodology for metadata and data sets. And we are a member, we're working with DataCite in order to provide digital object identifiers for our data and metadata. These are persistent identifiers similar to the ones that are given for journal articles. So you can find a data set in one place on the web. It has a unique URL. So we're making our data and metadata more available and more discoverable for the world. We were forming new partnerships in addition to the IPY and ArcticNet and the people in the first couple of slides. We're also recently getting new inquiries from other groups such as the Nunavut General Monitoring Plan to do their data archiving and their management. The Northwest Territories Discovery Portal, we're working on interoperability right now to share back and forth their data and metadata and our data and metadata. We're working with the Canadian High Arctic Research Station, which is supposed to be built in Cambridge Bay, Nunavut, by 2017 to be their data repository. And we're working very closely with the Canadian Polar Data Network, which is a more Canadian-wide group of institutions that is committed to research, polar research data preservation and access. And last week I was just in a meeting in Tokyo where I was speaking with metadata and data managers from Japan and UK and Sweden and several other countries to try to build an international metadata and data sharing network. So more future goals, I'm going to skip that and thank our partners and sponsors. We have a great deal of support from government institutions as well as partners in academia and nonprofit or NGO organizations. So thank you all for listening. Let me know if you have any questions, and please come to see our data and our websites, and let me know if you have any questions. All right, thank you. I see I'm digging into the coffee time, so I'll maybe keep it short.
Yeah, no, it's obviously a great system, and I appreciate all the best practices that are going into it and all the infrastructure that's in place. My question is, from business side of things, you have a lot of sponsors, part of units, board, so that's where the funding comes from. But for other researchers, right, we've tried different systems, having different systems in place, and we always get to this point that these systems are hard to maintain, expensive to maintain, and there need to be some resources put into it. So I guess that's more of an open question as to what are the options to support this kind of work. Because in our field of construction management, if something like this was online, it would help a lot of people. But there's always this bottleneck as to what's the financial model.
Right, and that is, so the question was about how to keep it sustainable, basically, how to get something like this going and how to keep it going for the long term. We have actually had great support from ArcticNet. They give us base funding every year, but they end in 2018. And we also have had very good support from Aboriginal Affairs, from the government, through the IPY program, and now CHARS and BRIA and NCP. But these are pots of money that come every year. They're not money that is like line item funded in the budget for the long term. However, we are actually on a campaign right now to speak to government at the highest levels in order to try to increase the support for data management across the board in Canada. Not just the Polar Data Catalog, not just what we're doing, but to increase the understanding within government and increase the hopefully the support for data management, so that maybe some of that $10 billion could be devoted at the outset, straight from NSERC, straight from SHRC, or whoever else is giving money for research, to actually commit a portion of their budget to data management. Now, the question is, do you give that to the repositories? Do you give that straight to the researchers? Because the researchers need to hire data managers too. It's not just us that needs money. The researchers need to have data managers on their staff who can help them on their end work with the repositories. So you need an expert on both ends. So we're very much trying to work at a national level in order to try to get exposure and recognition of the need for this kind of funding. And Dr. Thompson laid it out really well in that, we have a lot of really good ideas, and we have, a number of portals set up, not just for polar data, but for all kinds of data. These need support if they're going to go on into the future, into 50 or 500 years. So does that answer?
In my opinion, this is a great pilot study as to what this could look like for all other fields, right? It's a matter of where would the support come from. Because going to NSERC and other sources for money, they should technically be supporting it, because they're funding the research, they might as well fund it. Did it?
Well, I believe, and Chad Gaffield was here last year from SHRC, and they've actually set aside a pot of money for data management, for SHRC research, so social sciences. And I don't know that people are making use of this money from what we heard.
The last I heard, it wasn't very well utilized, but SSHRC now will accept expense items in a proposal for research data management. So I think it's just raising some of the awareness that that's available to researchers should they want to and need to make available.
Yep. And if the Tri-Council would make a requirement for data management plans and for, depositing and making available research data, that would go a long way. But you don't want it all to be the stick. You want carrot too. You want to convince the researchers that this is a good thing and that it's to their benefit and that it will help them.
Well, the requirement is there, but there's no system to actually support it. And the fact that you give the researcher money doesn't really mean anything, because if everybody comes up with their own portal, with their own system, then that defeats the whole purpose. But
it needs to be
something that NSEC would adopt as the method, then
it needs to be coordinated, and it sounds like from the national level that there is coordination on the policy. So hopefully that'll start trickling down in terms of places to put things, So.
Is Holotator, is that run on GeoNetwork?
Is it? No, we actually have Oracle database underlying everything. We do have a test instance of GeoNetwork in place that we're working on right now and trying to get it into a production mode. Maybe one more.
So suppose for an individual research group that thinks, oh, we have lots of data that may be of interest to other people, we're interested in keeping that data safe for our own purposes as well. Is there anything available at the university level to support those sorts of things?
I'm going to pass this to Pascal.
Not that I know of. I think things are pretty much done within the individual faculties at this point.
Yeah, I think there are discussions ongoing to provide capabilities for that at the university level, but it's not there. So I think there's there's definitely been inquiry. And I think the library in particular is trying to figure out how can we respond to this need. So we'd be interested maybe at the end at 11:30 to hear more of what you all need and maybe how the university could help, how the library could assist. I believe this is part of what we had planned for 11:30. So, okay, well, thank you all very much. And Rachel, I think we had, where'd she go? I think we have coffee and tea in the back. So, is it in the next room? Okay, so some in the back from this morning, and then right in the next door room, some coffee and tea and snacks. And we'll be back here in 10 or 15 minutes?
Yep.
Okay.